Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? You know what? You're seeing my beautiful face. So you know that means it's Friday and it's 7 p.m. And that means it's another episode of No Label Live. And No Label Live, if you haven't seen us before, we are all about talking about ways leaders have turned their labels from adversity to their advantage, and how they have learned to live a no label defines me life. So today's guest is Miss Katarina Gleisberg. Katarina is an entrepreneur and an educator. She's the founder of ELL Teacher Share, and she is all about mindfulness and education. Katarina, what's going on?
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm excited to talk about education and mindfulness.
Absolutely. I know you are super passionate about both topics. So I want to dive right in and ask you, why do you think you became so passionate about education first?
So my mom was a teacher, and ever since I was little and she was teaching, preschool, Sunday school, I would go and help her from the time I was probably, fourth grade or so. And I just like working with kids, and that whole making a difference feeling was inside me from a very, very, very young age. I was in lots of different organizations, service groups and Girl Scouts and church groups and things, where we're taught to serve and give back. And so that was just within me.
All right. So if we're looking at the label of being an educator or a teacher, how do you define that for yourself?
So how do I define what being an educator is?
Yeah, let's go with that.
So being an educator is commitment to building people up and instilling a love of learning. Along with that, I feel like the best of educators themselves are lifelong learners who are committed to growth. Because I feel like we learn the best through teaching, right? There were several things, like as a fourth grade teacher, when we got a new science curriculum, where I was like, oh, I don't know a lot about some of these science units, but I learned the best because I was teaching them.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I've got that as the last chapter in my book. So I'm right there with you. You really know that you have learned something when you have the ability to teach it to someone else, for sure. And so with the want to be a lifelong learner, being committed to raising other people up, what's the idea behind wanting to use mindfulness to shift the state of education?
Great question. I will try to keep it concise. It's something I'm so passionate about and I have a long history with that evolved. So I will just start with that. I first taught elementary school in Nebraska, and then I moved overseas and I taught in Greece, an American international school where I was teaching English language learners. And then I taught in Panama, and then I taught adult refugees English back in the United States. So having those very different teaching contexts of very different ages, socioeconomic statuses, backgrounds, availability of resources, etc. My experience teaching in all of those contexts, there was a very clear need that was similar between all of those contexts. And that was that students are more engaged and more grateful and more able to produce quality work focus after they have practiced some sort of a mindfulness technique.
Mm.
And it came about when I was teaching fourth grade at this school I was in Nebraska, where we were very fortunate to have a BIST, which is Behavior Intervention Support Team, a BIST consultant come to our school, I think about once a month. And she helped, we called her BIST Jackie, and she was an angel. And she would take any requests from teachers as far as behavior issues they saw, classroom management, anything. And she would help. She would come observe and she would help them problem solve. And one of the things that BIST Jackie modeled, and pretty much all the classrooms, was this mindfulness technique that is called TAPS, total and perfect silence. And TAPS, this moment of whenever things are starting to feel difficult, there's tension, you're in a transition, the kids would just automatically know after, because they had been trained, to be in this state where they're focusing on their breath. And it made me a better teacher, because when I was an elementary school teacher and there's all these crazy transition times coming in from recess or switching from math to reading, and I can't get the technology to work as it should, and these kids are arguing, and this kid can't find his book, and someone's making fun of someone else, and there's all this stuff going on. And the moment I would say TAPS, it would just bring this sense of calm. And so it was natural for me when I moved overseas to bring that strategy to my classroom, where I was teaching all different grade levels. And so to see it work with all different grade levels, and I was teaching English language learners, many of whom were beginners who couldn't speak any English. So that there's that added pressure, stress that these kids are dealing with of, I can't understand what anybody is saying around me. And the fact that it was helping all ages, all cultures, and I had students from 16 different native languages. I had teachers who would ask me about it. Oh, how did you get so-and-so to complete this much work? Or they'd walk in, or how are they sitting and working so carefully? These questions. And then eventually my school principal asked me to teach this mindfulness strategy at a school-wide assembly so that all grades could get it. And then it just followed me, and it really, really was most clear when I was in some other overseas schools, and I was supposed to be helping them with their academic content, with English teaching methodologies.
Mm-hmm.
The classrooms were so dysfunctional, with kids not engaged or off in the back playing with bottle caps, sharpening pencils, not having books opened, and the teacher didn't circulate amongst students. And when I was supposed to give feedback, I said, before we can tackle the academic issues, we need to first tackle classroom management. And one of the best ways to do that is a mindfulness technique. And then it just ended up being something that many teachers requested of me, of, will you model this in my classroom? And so being that's what I practice, is the mindfulness comes first. Mm-hmm. Well, I just saw the need just transmit to different age groups. And now mindfulness is what I'm studying.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about all the teachers who are going to get an opportunity to see this. And so if this is something that's not currently in their school, or something that they don't currently practice, what's a small exercise that you could walk us through that they could use during their, I know we're in summer break right now, but as they go back into school next year, what can they use to kind of bring mindfulness first to themselves and then to the students?
Absolutely. So the first strategy that I used in my fourth grade classroom is called TAPS, total and perfect silence. And this is something that is modeled the first several times for the kids. But whenever the teacher says TAPS, the kids know they automatically assume the TAPS position, which is straight.
All right.
Feet are planted on the floor.
Okay.
The next thing that you do is you buckle your hands. Okay. And they just rest the hands on the desk.
Okay.
Now, relax the shoulders. And it's super important that the grounding practice of sitting up straight and having your feet touch the ground, because a lot of us are so disconnected from our bodies. So that grounding practice gives us this sense of security and safety. So once we're sitting up nice and straight, then we have the kids just practice slow inhaling and exhaling so that the inhales and the exhales are equal. Because a lot of us in times of anxiety or just in our normal breathing, we actually spend more time on the inhale than the exhale. And though the inhale brings nourishment, the exhale brings cleansing to get rid of anything that we don't want in the body. So the exhale, having that equal length or even longer, is so important to get rid of the anxiety. And then we have the kids close their eyes. And then we have them either focus on just imagining a place that is peaceful for them, or we have them just practice mindfulness in terms of paying attention to any one or more of the senses. So that could be just listening to what they hear, mindful listening. It could be paying attention to the body sensations of just noticing the breath and how it feels to breathe in and out through the nose. It could be just focusing on how the hands feel against the desk. And I have them do this for as long as they need. And for sometimes it's as long as I need as the teacher.
Yeah.
Because like I said, when it's those transition times, as I'm sure most teachers can relate to, and you have the kids waiting for a lesson and your technology is not working and all this other stuff is going on, to have the kids there silent just brings this sense of calm. And then afterwards, I'm a better teacher. And obviously that sense of calm can radiate from me to the kids, just like stress can radiate.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I hope that you guys, as teachers who watch this, find this helpful if you're not currently using it with your students. And I think it's like you nailed it on the head. Those transition times for everybody are a little rough. It's just like, oh, now I have to go back to learning, and you're like, oh, I have to go switch back to teaching. So it's being mindful that it's a stressful time for everybody for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And I do have, and we can include the link. I actually wrote a blog post about TAPS. This is one of the first posts that I wrote because this is what inspired my whole mindfulness journey in the first place. And so it has the steps listed out, and there is even a video included. It's literally a 1 or 2 minute video that was done with a group of third graders that I had, showing that they're like acting crazy in the beginning, and then they just automatically, when they hear TAPS, they go and they shift right to peaceful poses.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we will throw that in the show notes below. So when a couple of things came to mind, because I actually got to watch you actually teach one of those classes for refugee students. And a question that came to my mind is, when you were teaching those students, what kind of labels did you see them having to fight through, being in a new place and trying to learn all this new stuff?
I think the label of foreigner is something that many of them were dealing with. Now, I am very grateful that my students were full of gratitude and expressed it on a daily basis.
Oh, yes, I did.
And I am also very grateful that right away from the get-go, I think we created a classroom environment that was very safe and vulnerable. So, and there were so many opportunities for speaking prompts, because I do not believe in a lecture style classroom, right? I believe in lots of activities. So I think the style of the classroom allowed students to be vulnerable and express their concerns. So they would ask me lots of questions, and they would tell me things that are difficult for them. So things such as, I think it might have even been one of the times that you were visiting. I had a student request, how do I order at the Burger King drive-through?
Mm-hmm.
Because their accent is something that they take on as part of, this is my huge identity. And so it kind of makes them self-conscious when speaking English out in public as they're learning. And so they just wanted to be understood. And I heard time and time again of, I thought I was ordering what the words were on the screen, but they kept saying they couldn't understand me. And that was very defeating for them. I've heard the same thing about at restaurants, or when people go to Lowe's to buy gardening tools. And so that label of foreigner and accent seemed to be something that I saw them struggling with.
And what do you feel like is something, as another human being who obviously doesn't have those same struggles? We all have struggles, but we don't have those same struggles. What's the best way you feel like we can show up and be somebody who makes that person feel understood?
I feel like most of us who are compassionate communicators naturally have it within us to ask questions. And that is simply the most respectful thing that we can do, is not assume and just ask questions. Like if you're someone in a store and you see someone confused, literally ask them, is there something I can help you with? And when they seem to be struggling with their language, use gestures. Point, repeat yourself using different words, different styles of sentences, because I feel like many times what I experience when I would go out in public with my students is there would be people who would hear this accent or hear that they are hesitant to speak and that they're very slow, and assume that that means that they don't know any English. A lot of my students would say, I don't know English. When I would ask them to share, they would introduce themselves to guests, and I would say, okay, share where you're from, what your languages are, your favorite hobbies. And they would never include English as one of their languages. You do speak English. You're growing, right? You don't feel fluent yet, but you do speak English. So I would guide my students and give them sentence frames so they could say things like, I'm learning English. Mm-hmm. Can you please slow down? Because many times if the native speaker simply slows down their language and uses more simple vocabulary, they can easily understand.
Yeah, so I've actually dealt with something very similar in my life, and that's the fact that people will automatically communicate differently sometimes when they see me walk up. If they actually see me and they realize that there's something different about me, they automatically make the assumption that it's something cognitively wrong as well. So you get that when people super slow down and they talk to you like you don't understand anything. So I can totally relate to that feeling of feeling misunderstood for sure.
Right. And I also tell my students, I teach them to be an advocate for themselves. So say what it is that you need. Because a lot of students, just because it is uncomfortable, will nod as though they understand. That's when I'll say, if you say if you don't understand, please say, can you repeat? Can you slow down? Or ask a question such as, is this the same as this? So that if you think you understand, you can just make sure. And then not only that, just use your manners and address whatever the elephant in the room is. So if the cashier at the store isn't understanding you and they don't know whether it is, you don't understand, or is it just is it an accent issue? Just tell them, I'm learning English. Can you slow down? Basic things like that some of them were afraid to ask for. But the thing is, when we ask for help, it is that you're familiar with the Franklin effect, right?
Oh, no.
So Benjamin Franklin actually coined this. And the Franklin effect was so a lot of people have this misconception that if I ask for help, I'm being a burden.
Yeah, I'm being weak. Yeah.
Right. And so Benjamin Franklin actually found the reverse to be true. When we ask for help, the other person is actually on the most part, very honored that you are asking them for help. And we innately are humans who want to be helpful. We want to create connection. So when we ask questions, even if we start with this really, really simple one, then it opens up the door for the person to want to help you, even beyond that one very, very small request. That person will want to help you and help you and help you and help you. Right, as long as you're not taking advantage, right? But if it's a simple thing, like for help in a store. And so I explained that to my students and said, like, if you're very clear and you're right away, you let them know I'm learning English, whatever. Most people are compassionate. And I did hear that time and time again, especially from many of my refugee students. Once they've been in the Midwest for a long time, they say, we really like the Midwest. The people are friendly. People go out of their way to help me.
Yeah, man, that's so powerful. That's actually something that in the coaching that I'm going through, one of the questions is, what do you think, and I might be butchering it, but it boils down to, what do you think is the biggest thing that you can do that costs no money but makes the biggest difference? And what I wrote was the realization that you can ask for help. Right? But it's the thing that it doesn't matter who you are as a human being. We do not like to do that because we have that association with it's a problem. And
Right.
and I'm not able to solve it myself.
Right.
So I feel less than.
Right.
So.
And I totally believe in, and I remember this a lot now. So Nathan and I were very fortunate to have this awesome productivity coach named Penny. And I remember Penny saying, and it was also in her book, she uses the phrase, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so whenever I've hesitated about that, I just remember, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I have found recently, especially because I'm going through this interesting life transition where I'm doing a lot of things that are newer for me, using websites, social media, and all this technology is not something I was previously comfortable with, especially with building a website. And I was at a women's networking group where we went around and we spoke about what it is that we're passionate about, what it is that we're working on, and then where could we use support. And when I shared that things with the website and all of this is difficult, I, after the meeting, had 2 women who came up to me individually that said, oh, I can help you with a website. Oh, I can help you with social media branding.
Mm.
And it's one of those things where had I not been vulnerable and putting it out there with these are my needs, my areas where I could use support, I wouldn't have received that support. And these 2 ladies have become great friends of mine over the last several months. So I'm very grateful for that message of if you don't ask, you don't get.
Awesome. That's going to be a huge takeaway for today's show. I can't believe that we've already talked for as long as we have. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
So, having done a lot of networking and joining several groups, I have met so many people who are offering me brand new opportunities. And I thought, having left the traditional education world, in which I was feeling a bit caged, and that self-worth thing was plaguing me, a feeling like nothing was ever good enough. I wanted to still be involved in education, but in a non-traditional way. And I have been finding that the more that I put myself out there and sharing things, people are asking me about opportunities. So right now, I'm working on a mindfulness certification, and I'm teaching a mindfulness class, and I'm really excited about that.
Really excited. All right. Yeah. I mean, that jumping all in, right? It can make it a huge difference, even if when we first dip the toe in, it's really scary. And often we back up a couple times before we decide to jump all in. What, to get the most out of the time we've got left, is there something that we haven't talked about to this point that you would like to talk about?
Sure. Because I have noticed that mindfulness supports all ages, one of the things that is awesome is that mindfulness is free and accessible to anyone in any place while doing any activity.
Mm.
So, being that this is something that I'm so passionate about, I actually had a teacher friend request that I make some very short mindfulness videos that have techniques that anyone can practice with breathing, or some of them include some very simple like adaptive yoga moves, and many of them are 1 to 5 minutes long. So if anyone is interested in some really simple mindfulness exercises to bring some peace and calm in your life, check out my YouTube channel. Or if there's something specifically that you're looking for, like I have made videos upon request, and I would love to share that, because I mean, gosh, once we take ownership of making our self-care and our mental peace a priority, we are able to radiate that to everyone around us. So I would love to do whatever I can to help spread that.
All right. So with that in mind, what is the handle and where can people connect with you?
Yes. So my name, Katarina Gleisberg, is my YouTube channel. My website will be changing to Katarina Gleisberg as well. It's Katarina Gleisberg on Instagram. Neither name is, or neither of my first or last name is easy to spell. So yes, we'll just kind of do a link.
Yeah, it'll be in the comments, so everybody will be able to connect. It'll be super easy.
Yeah.
And of course, you know this question is coming. So, well, let me ask you this. first. So as you've made this transformation for yourself, how would you now define Katarina Gleisberg?
Thanks, Nathan. Oh, those important value words are coming in. I would say creative, authentic, and impactful.
And if there's a future teacher who's going to see this, what piece of advice would you have for them as they prepare?
Self-care. Self-care.
Mm.
Having been an elementary school teacher for 9 years, I see the most gracious, giving teachers who totally deplete themselves. And I did this for years. Teachers who they're at school for maybe 10 hours a day, and then they take things home to grade on nights and on weekends, and that self-care isn't a priority.
Mm.
Don't check your email after you leave your classroom. Don't check that work email. Like, honor yourself. A lot of teachers are like, oh, I'm too tired to work out, to go to yoga, to whatever. Oh my gosh, the realizations that I've had because I made yoga and meditation priorities in my life.
Man, self-care, people.
Yes, there's that cage of that I felt for the longest time that hovering helicopter parents were telling me, and test scores and administrators in school districts and curriculum standards of nothing's ever good enough. And that was something I realized that I needed to just rip off. And I feel so much freer because of it. So yes, self-care.
Wow. And so I took away one other thing there, and that's the fact that if you're watching this and you are a teacher, or no matter who you are, this applies to anyone, but the fact that you are enough at whatever you're doing. Like, if you haven't completed a skill yet, you haven't learned it to perfection, you're still working on it, and you are good enough at what you're doing, as long as you never give up on chasing whatever that is you want to do, unless you make the choice to say, this no longer serves me. So I got one final question, and you've had lots of time to think about it. I know you know what it is. So what does no label defines me mean to you?
So it means that I am open to new possibilities. Any glimpse of a dream that comes into mind is accessible. And part of not letting a label define me also means that I take risks when it's really, really hard. And in my experience, feeling like my teaching degrees dictated my job. I'm taking risks to go after something even when I'm unsure of the outcome. That makes me want to tear up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember this.
We got to it at the very end, people. All right.
It's recorded. There
Yeah.
will be times, Nathan, if I'm not remembering this, remind me of my own words, please.
Oh, absolutely. I'll make sure that you remember. Man, this has been such a great interview, and you've shared so many nuggets of wisdom. So all that I ask is that if you are a teacher you know a teacher had an impact on your life. So this goes out to anyone, because we've all had an impact from a teacher. I 100% believe that. So make sure and share this so that teachers can see this and they can get new glimpses into maybe some possibilities that aren't available to them yet, or they can just relate to uh, many of Katrina's story 100%, and let them know that they've made a difference in your life. And with that, remember, if you're saying this, you're up to big things. And when you're up to big things, you must be patient, you must be diligent, and you must never, never quit. And you can join us here next Friday for another episode of No Label Live.